All right, so I was watching this video, Dub speaking on the NLR, which everybody knows is short for Nazi lowriders. He was speaking on saying that he was on the yard with them, and they were never putting in work. And so I wanted to make a little short video on the Nazi lowriders, where they came from, where they started from, a brief little history of them, and the truth about them. And so the Nazi lowriders started in the 1970s. They were started in Preston and CYA. Now, the Nazi lowriders was started basically like a branch off of the AB. And what it was they were basically kids being trained and prepared to move up in the ranks through CDC into either P9 or the AB and stuff like that. So the Nazi lowriders, they're a white supremacist movement, or was started as a white supremacist movement, which was usually kids that have been victimized by gangs and stuff like that. With the Nazi lowriders, you didn't have to be completely white like you did with the skinhead movement and these other groups. The Nazi lowrider, there'd be kids with last name Hernandez or Garcia. As long as they were part white, they could be Nazi lowrider. And by doing that, it allowed fast growth into their cause, because a lot of these kids who weren't Northerners or Southerners but have been victimized by them knew that if they were in CYA by themselves and not part of something, they'd be preyed upon or victimized by these gangs and other stuff. So the Nazi lowriders was their protection. But by doing that, these kids, from being victimized and stuff like that, had a lot of resentment and hate towards other people, and started becoming violent and victimizing people themselves. Now, Dub said that the Nazi lowriders, he was on the yard with them. They weren't doing nothing. Okay, well, January 28, 1999, California Department of Corrections had determined that the Nazi lowriders was becoming a threat in CYA. So the AB, the MA, the NF, and shit like that were slammed indeterminate shoe terms in CDC. Now, the Nazi lowriders was growing so fast in the CYA that CDC determined, okay, we're about to have a big problem on our hands. We got all these violent kids that are claiming NLR, hitting the streets and committing violent crimes. And now that they start hitting the California Department of Corrections, we need to put a stop to this before they start showing up in our prison system. So on January 21st or 28, 1999, CDCER had enough evidence to slam all NLR members with indeterminate shoe terms and put them in the shoe. Now, my 18 years of being in prison, I've only ever met one NLR member on a yard. And that's because he slipped through the cracks. They didn't have him documented on the streets. He had the tattoos on the back of his head, But at the time of when he got arrested and the time of his sentence, he started growing his hair. So when he hit CDC reception and was first coming in, they didn't see the tattoos on the back of his head. He ended up slipping through the cracks and hit the yard. But he made it clear that he didn't want to put out there that he was NLR because he didn't want to do the indeterminate shoot. Now, NLR has always been slammed in the shoe. It was just recently when all the higher ups started signing the peace treaties with the AB, the NF, and the MA and shit like that, that they started releasing those dudes back to the yards, slowly releasing to the yards, that the NLR is slowly being released to the yards with them, along with anybody else that was validated in the prison system. Now, the NLR is a white supremacist gang or movement. The difference with white supremacist movements and regular northern or southern gangs is sentencing laws. Is how the FBI looks at us. With gangs, northerners, southerners, you have law enforcement that when you get arrested, you get hit with gang enhancement, criminal street gang enhancement, shit like that. Now, if you're a member of a white supremacist movement, you get hit with hate crime. And that's due to the Anti-Defamation League and white supremacist groups being put on the terrorist watch list. So with a street gang enhancement, you then get 3 years, maybe 5 years. If you're white, you commit a crime and you're a validated skinhead or known white supremacist, you're getting hit with a 10-year enhancement. And instead of just being on a local law enforcement little known gang member list, you're put on the FBI's terrorist watch group list for being a skinhead member and stuff like that. Now, I had somebody in my comments, he was respectful. He commented, he said, "Hey, I'm a black man. I just wanted to ask, are you racist?" And he said, "I'm just asking because blacks can't be racist." So I commented back. I said, "No, I'm not racist. Probably at one point in my life, I was, until I started growing up and I started seeing more truth upon stuff. But one thing I've never understood or agreed with was, how could somebody sit there and say, oh, these whites are racist, but because they hate somebody for their skin color, but I've met lots of blacks that hate whites because of their skin color. So how is that not racist? It's the same exact thing. You're hating somebody for their skin color. Regardless of what color your skin is, if you hate somebody else because of their skin color, you're racist. There's no other way of looking at that. You can try to justify it however you want and say, well, you haven't had all this certain different stuff happen to you or your race. Regardless, you're hating somebody because of their skin color. You're a racist. That's the truth to it. And so I told him, like, no, I don't hate nobody because of their skin color. Like I said, I got a nephew that's half black. When I was in prison, he would write. So I was in his life the whole time, even though I was gone. He was in my life. And That's why people have asked, hey, did you cover up tattoos on your face? Yeah, I covered up some tattoos on my face and other tattoos on my body out of respect for my nephew and my own kids. I didn't want to be on the streets and have racist tattoos and have my nephew, who has been in my life support, and while I was locked up and him growing up, to come out and see that type of stuff on me and ask me like, "Hey, uncle, what's that?" or "What's the meaning to that?" Or my kids to say, "Hey, dad, what's that? What's that tattoo mean?" Because kids ask stuff like that. They'll see the tattoos and they ask you, "Hey, dad, what's that?" Or I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be blatantly disrespecting the ones I love. So I covered up my tattoos and stuff like that. And a lot of my beliefs changed when my sister had my nephew. Now, uh, back to the NLR. So they originally started in Preston Youth Facility in the 1970s. The majority of them were from Southern California, and then they slowly moved into Central California and Northern California. Their basic crimes was the same as like most white crimes, which was drug trafficking, extortion, armed robbery, assaults, murder, identity theft, money laundering. But their biggest thing was selling methamphetamine. And with that, it brought them a lot of allies, because majority of like the biker groups, that was their thing back in the days, was selling meth. So these NLR, they're coming out, they're putting in all the dirty work for the AB, because the AB was being slammed in the shoes. So they ended up allying up with the Hells Angels, the Mexican Mafia, the Mongols, P9, some Sereno groups, and the Vagos. And a lot of that was because that's where the drugs were processing through for them. Now, like I said, NLRs were always considered dangerous. They were always making a name for themselves, and by doing that, they never reached California prison yards. They never walked the yards like that because of the violence that they were doing, and because CDC already seen the problem that was about to reach their yards, and put that indeterminate shoe sentence on them for when they were coming in. So for somebody to sit and speak and say that, oh, I've been on the yard with them and I never seen them doing nothing, they've never put in work, dude, you're speaking out your neck. I've met other ones out on the streets. NLR is a dangerous group. Um, Skinheads, they're dangerous groups. On the yards, if something cracks off, if it's skinheads, they're making an example out of you. You fuck up, you might not walk away from it. It's not like other groups where if you got to be removed, there might be a couple people on you and one dude with a piece. There's nothing be like that. If you didn't get removed, the whole purpose of being removed is trying to take your win. Now, I know there's been a lot of like misunderstanding with white supremacist groups in California prison systems and stuff like that. But I don't know a single person that could say that they were on the yard with the NLR and they didn't do nothing. So like I said, CDC seen the problem coming right away and tried to put a stop to it as fast as they could. Because by the time that, by the time in 1999, FBI already had over 1,000 members of the Nazi lowrider documented. Law enforcement had over like 1,800 members documented just in the Southern California area. And that wasn't counting Central California and Northern California. And every single member was a dangerous member. Every single member was somebody that was willing to pick up a piece and use it. Every single member was trying to prove themselves so that they could move up into the Aryan Brotherhood or another group with high influence throughout the California prison system. So the NLR wasn't punks. They weren't people that would be on a yard and just walk around and let shit happen, even if they would have hit the prison system. So with the NLR always being on the shelf back in the shoe, it kept some of the violence off the prison yards. But they still had that same violence happening in the shoe on the group yards. Those dudes were still back there in the shoe putting in work, proving themselves like that. So, I don't know. Here's a suggestion for Dubs. Stick to what content you know about, which is the stuff going on with Southside and Sureños. Stay out of the white politics because you spoke out your neck on that video. You did a video just to get views and you didn't put no truth behind it. You tried to make the NLR sound like they were weak when they're not. They're a very dangerous group. And I think now on, if you then do a video, do your history on that group, especially if it has to do with a white supremacist movement. Speak on stuff you know truth about, Dubs, because you were playing with fire right there. You were speaking on a very dangerous group.